מסכת Bava Metzia, page 42. Today, in this absolutely fascinating daf, we're going to visit a lot of subjects in regard to guardian and monetary disputation and much more. Here is a story about the great Rabbi Weiss, the Dayan Weiss, who not only had a tremendous erudition and leadership, he was also a great posek, and I had the privilege to have Kamma on one of my books from him. And the question came up. It was a fellow lived here in New York. He was asked by a donor, wealthy individual, to just deliver to Israel, to Yerushalayim, a certain Torah institute, a very large sum of money in the envelope. So he called up the guy, he delivered it. The next day the donor called him up and said the fellow never received it. Turns out that the name is very similar, the name that the Torah institute that he delivered and the name the one he designated is really a similar name. He called up the fellow and he said, "I'm sorry this will happen." He said, "No problem, you can come over and pick it up." So he called him up, they went together to his office, and lo and behold, tragedy occurred. Everything is a mess, it was a big robbery, nothing left. Question is, what do you do now? Whom you go after and how? The donor said, "I gave it to my shaliach, my agent." The agent said, "I understood certain name and that's the name I deliver." The one who received it said, "I'm not a guardian, it was all a mistake. I put it in my office, I thought it's donation for my place." What do you do? That's a tshuva from Dayan Weiss that we're going to discuss later. As we said, it's a fascinating daf. We're going to discuss a matter of advising business, how to manage business, how to make a good fortune, and much more. So here we are, stay tuned, the Mishnah, page 42, top of the page. Mishnah Dosha Mafkid Ma'ot Etzel Chavero. Here we talk about the level of care that required when it's someone, he is a guardian for another fellow, but he's not getting paid for that. So, Hamafkid Ma'ot, if someone deposited cash, coins, whatever value, to another fellow, let's say Shimon gave to Reuven, who was unpaid guardian, cash, Utzraran ve'ifshilan le'achorav. The problem is he bound it in the cloth and then he slung it behind him. Or another option, שמסרן לבנו ולביתו הקטנים ונעל בפניהם שלא כראוי. Or he gave it to either his son or his daughter, the young one, meaning the minor son or daughter, for safeguarding. The problem is the way he locked the door, it wasn't in a good, fully way. And there are who hold here not vena'al, but ona'al, meaning either way. The key is shomer chinam. If he's an unpaid guardian, we learned several times that he is exempt from cases of stolen, lost, that beyond his control. But if it was a total negligence, he is responsible. So the question is, what do you do? Since the way he took that package and put it on his back, or gave it to his minor children, or didn't lock the door properly, then he is poshea, it's a negligent, and therefore chayav shelo shimer kederech hashomrim, because the way he is guardian, it's not the proper guardian, not in a typical way of guardian, and therefore he's liable to compensate, to pay for those coins or whatever the value is. Ve'im shimer kederech hashomrim, but if he safeguard the money in the matter that guardians safeguard items, so therefore patur is exempt. So it's a disputation here between Rashi and Tosfot. You see it also in Ramban and the Ran. The question is, what exactly, considering later when you see a discussion, what is the normal standard safeguard? What is the way that we expecting a guardian to safeguard if later on you see, just in those days it wasn't a safe place like safe you have in a bank and etc. It was in the ground. So what exactly transpired and why you didn't put it that way? Or how deep you need to dig down to put the money. So first the Gemara dealing with the first phase of the Mishnah, and they ask, Bishlama kulhu, if we understand all these scenarios that the Mishnah enumerated, that the guardian is liable shelo shimer kederech hashomim, that he is not guarded the way that it should be guarded. So Ela tzraran v'ivshilan me'achorav. Shimon saw Reuven in the street. He gave him the money and he just put it together and carried it on his back. So my havel lemeba. So what exactly expecting him to do? What more he needs to do? Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Kra. We learned the pasuk in regards to the second time. No, we learned it several times. If you live in Eretz Israel in those days and you need to bring the fruits to the temple, there was a very large sum that you cannot carry, especially in those days, with the donkey and the wagon. So you redeem them with cash and you go to Yerushalayim with the cash. So the Torah said in the book of Dvarim, chapter 14, V'tzarta hakesef beyadecha, and you shall bind up the money in your hand. So we derive from that, אף על פי שצרורים יהיו בידיך. Even though it's bound, in order to safeguard the money, it must be in your hand. In your hand, it's very important to understand that the idea is not so much hand, the Rosh explained, it's as long as it's in front of you, you can see it. The way he put it together, it's not a form of guardian property. There is a book written by students of Rabbi Chaim Volozhin. Its name is Galia Masechet. In those days, it was a wagon and horses. You read the history of in the European history, European Jewry. So it was a glon fellow that owns horses and wagon, and someone gave him a very valuable package with cash and more to deliver to another location. And what happened is he just did it as a kind of gesture. The problem that he fell asleep in one of his way in his own wagon, and he put it under his pillow, and all of a sudden it disappeared. So the question is, he discussed based on our sugya in his book, Galia Masechet, if that's considering a pshia or not, because in one hand is unpaid guardian, on the other hand, the way he puts it, it's not enough to safeguard in that way. ואמר רבי יצחק, לעולם יהא כספו של אדם מצוי בידו. Here, he gives us advice. He just said, Rabbi Yitzchak, a person's cash and his person's money should always be found in his possession, meaning the investment should not be of all of his money. He should have it in a way, in the level of attachment. In the simple way, we are talking here about the second time. But indirect in a remez, the rabbis tells us, it's applied to money that the person should have, meaning if there is a business deal or something like that, he should have the assets to invest. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, this is an excellent advice. He said, "Lo'odam yashlish adam ma'otav." A person should divide his assets to 3 different segments, which is shlish bakarka, 1/3 he should put in the ground. So put in the ground, the way the Maharsha said that it's a real estate investment. You can say that the way those days they just buried it in the ground, but Maharsha said that that's applied to real estate. Ushlish beprakmatia. Second one, as the Maharsha explained, is that there's a business deal that you can gain a lot of income and have a cash flow. Ushlish tachat yado, and 1/3 the person should have cash. So if some business come up suddenly, he will be able to have the assets, the cash, to invest in that business deal. One of well-known stories about the late Rabbi Moshe Weisblum, the story goes that I'm sure that many of you remember it was the time that the stock market went really downhill. So when he heard that, Rabbi Feinstein said, look, people don't follow the advice of our sages, so why are they surprised? He said that here the Gemara said clearly that a person should divide his assets to 3 different sources. 1/3 real estate, 1/3 in business, and 1/3 cash. All of a sudden, these people put the entire money in the stock market, and then they lost their pants. What are you expecting? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, another important guidance from Rabbi Yitzchak, En habracha metzuya, ela bedavar hasamui min ha'ayin. The blessing is only in a matter that it's concealed from the eyes. The rabbis explain that that's not what we learn several times as a ayin hara, an evil eye, but it's more kind of sign of blessings. They bring a source from the 2nd book of Kings, chapter 4, that the Elisha said to that lady who said, "Ubat v'sagarta delet ba'adechu ve'ad banayich," which is the source. Person should conceal. שנאמר יצא השם את הברכה באסמך, that they said in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, that blessing is found only in a matter over which the eye has no dominion, because they said that the Creator will command blessing with you in your storehouses. So therefore, one should, in a way, conceal it from public display. תנא דבי רבי ישמעאל, אין הברכה מצויה בדבר שאין העין שולט בו. The blessing is only in the things that is hidden from the eyes. שנאמר יצא בשם את הברכה באסמך, same pasuk, which means that again it should be concealed. Tosfot challenged that, and he said, we learn in Talmud that דבר הקצור, that thinks that it's in a measure, that is the Nezikin and shlita. So he explained, and you see it also in the beautiful Hasidic commentary of Rabbi Moshe. He explained, when we say the bracha, Yibarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, may God save you, that's applied to monetary. And they said, v'yishmerecha min ha'mazikin. So again, that's the whole idea that there are some situations that there is some type of concern when it's open in public display and more. Tanu Rabbanan orech la'amod et gorno. Here we talk about the measurement. So one who goes to measure the grain of his threshing floor, he recites a blessing. That prior to that action, אומר ירצון לפניך השם אלוקינו, שתשלח ברכה במעשה ידינו. May it will be will of God to bring a blessing in our hands. התחיל לעמוד אומר, when he started to have this measure of the grain, he said, Baruch Ada Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, that's the Ritva said B'Shem Malchut, HaSholech Bracha Bakri Hazeh, that bring a blessing upon this pile of grain. Madad ve'achar kach beirach. If one measured and afterward recites the blessing, this is a prayer made in vain. Arezet tfilat shav. Lechi shenabracha Metzia, because blessing is found neither in a matter that is weighed, lo bedavar shakul, velo bedavar hamadud, nor in a matter that is counted, velo bedavar hamanui, not in the something that it's a measure, counted, in the single unit, ela bedavar samui mina, in all the matter that is concealed from the eye, shenemar, the same pasuk, yetzav Hashem et habracha v'asmecha, the Almighty will command blessing with you in your storehouses. I heard once from a Shoah survivor, a Holocaust survivor, says that after they were beaten up, they get a very small food. But he said that he kept saying, you hear it a lot from the Rav Arush, who said it a lot, Amarti toda v'noshati, that the person say thank you for the whatever he had, even small. And he said that's the formula for his survivor. He kept saying and saying, thank you, and that's what made him kept him on. There is a book called Chabad Dat. He discussed the minhag to take apple and honey on Rosh Hashanah. And he said from here, from this Ritva and from our Sugya, you can prove that one can say Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avoteinu based on the statement we just read. One can say that full statement with God and God of our ancestors when he dipped in apple and with the honey. Yes, so we heard a lot of guidance and advice when it's come to assets and money. I would like to also share with you something from my great-great-grandfather, Rabbi Moshe Weisblum of Lizhensk. In the Parashat Yitro, on the pasuk Lo ta'asu iti Elokei chesed ve'Elokei zahav lo ta'asu lachem, he brings a beautiful formula, and he said the best formula to a person to get success and wealth is by study Torah. I'm just reading his words. He says, הרוצה להעשיר יצפין, פירוש יבוא לאדם מחשבה לעשירות, שיעשיר יצפין, פירוש ילמד תורה ותבוא לעשירות ממילא, וזכות התורה תעמוד עם השם הוא שיעשיר. וזהו מצפון זהב יעתה, פירוש על ידי שילמד תורה ממילא, תבוא לו זהב ועשירות. So here we said, obviously, if a person had the merit and the deserve, etc., that he gets his wealth by study Torah. Again, it's all in a measure of heavenly decision, as we said in Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, but obviously it's a good guidance and advice to all of us. Now the Gemara goes back to all of guarding money. אמר שמואל כספים אין להם שמירה אלא בקרקע. Here we need to know the historical context, because what Shmuel said is that there is a safeguarding for money only in the ground. So in those days it wasn't safe and it wasn't other form of guarding money. But based on his statement, if a person did not put it in a proper way, meaning bury it, that's a negligence. And even if he's unpaid guardian, he needs to pay. The big question is how far you go with that, because sometimes burying in the ground can ruin the money. אמר רב, מודה שמואל בערב שבת בין השמשות ולא תלכו רבנן. Rabbi said that here is the exception. It says that Shmuel concedes if one received the deposit on Shabbat Eve at twilight, that the rabbis did not impose upon him to bury it in the ground immediately. So there are many stories. You see a lot of psikot from the late Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, or from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and others that guided us to be very careful when it's get close to Shabbat, that one should be very cautious. And here they say that one should, we not impose on him to do it just before the twilight, before the entering of Shabbat. Ve'im shahar motzei Shabbat shi'ur lemikberim hu, ve'lo kvarim hu mechayev. So if he waits until after Shabbat and is delay it and didn't bury it, so he's liable. He needs to pay whatever is lost. But if it's a Torah scholar and the guardian thought perhaps that Savar Dilma Mibai Lezuzel Avdalta, he requires money for Avdallah, that's the reason that he did not bury the money immediately, then he may delay burying the money a bit longer. So the Magen Avraham bring here a proof that the obligation to do Avdallah is upon everyone, not only Torah scholar, but the way that Magid Mishneh and others said it was most probably a level of poverty, that one depend upon others to do the Havdalah, or they need a special money to do it. Nowadays that we have Gashashim, that we have Ramangers who find and steal buried property. So in the military you see them all over. They can discover things that we in our eyes hardly find. I have the privilege to see a Bedouin and Druze and people like that, the special Gashashim, they are able to discover things that I'll never be able to see it. Ein lahem shmira ela bishmei korah. They have no other way to guard it, that money are only in the bin of the roof of the house. And now that we have all this commonplace, all these places that people, unfortunately thieves, break walls, so they only safeguard between the bricks of the wall. So Shmuel conceived that the money can be safeguarded in the wall, and he said, some said ben akranot, some said between the corners of the house. And now that we have that tappers who tap the walls to find and steal property hidden there, they hear the noise. Only safeguard if you put it in a handbreadth on the wall that's connected to the ground, or betefach hasamuch l'shmei korah, or the handbreadth of the wall that connected to the ceiling. Stepping on the wall will not reveal their existence. You see a lot of nowadays. There's a lot of machinery that can discover it. There's stories in World War II how they are able to discover hidden Jews. Is the soldiers used to punch the ground or the walls and they discover bunkers and things like that. We learn in Psachim when it's come to bi'ur chametz, to extinguish the chametz, in Psachim page 31b, chametz shenafla alav mapolet hareu kimvoar, which is if you have a situation that you have 11 bread upon which a rock slide fell, is like that of leavened bread that was eliminated and it will remain there forever. That's applied only when the dog is unable to detect it. V'tana Kamma chafisat hakelev, and we learn how much is the measure of detection of a dog. And they said 3 tfachim, 3 handbreadth. Hachamai, what about here? Mibeinu shlosha tfachim, although he would need 3 handbreadth or not. Amarlei hakam mishum reicha beinan shlosha tfachim. Here, he says, because we have the smell, the sand that requires 3 handbreadths to observe from the dog. Hacham mishum ikasuya me'ina lo beinan shlosha tfachim. But here, when we need to obscure it from the eye to bury it, so we do not need the 3 handbreadths. So the Gemara asks, V'chama marafram mizicha tefach. So Rafram of Sicha said 1 handbreadth. So first of all, we should know that nowadays the dogs are so well trained to smell. You go to the airport, they smell if you bring fruits or vegetables, or that will be the bomb they can smell. Obviously drugs and anything like that, the dogs can smell it easily. So you can argue, you can say that they can smell also cash or things like that, depending on how you train them. But it's a machloket rishonim, is a disputation among the early rabbis if the require of tefach, of 1 breath, applies solely adama, solely the ground, or also the walls. Now the Gemara brings 5 important stories in regards to safeguard money. Haugava le'afkid zuzei gabe chavrei, otibnu betzrifa de urbani. So a fellow Reuven deposit money by Shimon, and the Shimon, the guardian, he placed it where? In the willow hut from which the money was stolen, ignu. Amar Yosef, Afal gav deleinan ganav netirutei. Yosef said that even though when it's come to thieves, placing the money in the hut is effective safeguarding, but when it's come to this type of negligent, le'inyan nura, Tosfot said it's like you bury it in the ground, but when it's come to fire, pshiutai, it's negligent. It's even though the beginning it's the negligent and ultimate was by accident, and therefore the guardian is liable to pay. Even though we said that the fire is negligent, but he said when it's come to thieves, it is effective safeguarding, and consequently, it is a case where the beginning of the incidents was negligent, and ultimately the damage was caused by accident, and there is a notion to have him exempt from payment. But we rule the Psak Halacha, the Gemara concludes, they said here when you have these incidents at the beginning, initially through negligence, and ultimately by accidents, the guardian is liable to pay. So while we study it, I was thinking about what we study on page 35. What's the difference between here and there? Maybe you want to emphasize the responsibility that one has in the case of negligence. But anyway, here we are with the second story. Chatam Sofer, by the way, the Chatam Sofer in Choshen Mishpat, chapter 11 and 12, there was a discussion in Teshuvah. He was a trustee in that Jewish community in Hungary that he used to collect different collaterals that they put it by him. People make agreements, and he was the trustee. And he had a few hut houses, you know, some made out of stone and some made out of wood. And all of a sudden there was a fire. But the fire took place on Yom Kippur. And the problem is, he couldn't save all these items. And the question is if he's responsible, if he's negligent or not. Anyway, second story, הוא גב הדף כתזוז לגבי חברי, אמר לי אב מזוזאי, אמר לי, לא ידענה איך הודבינו. ראובן gave to Shimon money, Shimon said, I don't know where I put it. עתה לקמי דרבא, אמר לכל לא ידענה פשיעותי זיל שלים. Says, whatever you don't know where is it, is a negligence you have to pay. Third story, הוא גב הדף כתזוז לגבי חברי, השלמינו לימי, ראובן gave a deposit to Shimon, and Shimon took that money and guess what? He gave it to his mom. Ve'otivnu bekartilta. So his mom, guess what she did? She placed the money in a chest. So the Mefarshim explained that that was the jewelry package. That was the place that they used to put in that chest. And all of a sudden, and it was stolen. What exactly we rule in this type of situation? If you tell the son, go and pay, why? Because if one guardian gave to another guardian without the consent of the owner, so whatever happens, he is responsible. So since one party, Reuven, gave it to Shimon, Shimon did not get the consent from Reuven to give it to his mom. Amar, that guardian can say, and he said, there is a principle. 42b, כל המפקיד על דעת אשתו ובניו ומפקיד. So here they said that one who deposits the item, so he is aware that the guardian's wife and children of the guardians will safeguard the item deposited. So therefore, he, in a way, I was within my rights to give the deposit to my mom. There is an argument over that in the Rishonim, in the early rabbis. They argue when you have a situation like Shomer Shemasar Shomer, that one guardian gave it to another guardian, is always liable or not? Reuven, he borrowed $1,000 from Shimon. Shimon's wife was the one who received back the $1,000 from Reuven, but somehow something happened to that money. So the question is, by halakha, do you consider one wife as a total recipient, equal recipient, when it's come to the definition of B'nai Beito? You see much more in the Choshen Mishpat 291, the general understanding of what do you mean by borrowing and giving back, or responsible or safeguarding money or assets when it's come to a household of a person. It's a question, is a paid guardian or not paid guardian, if you differentiate between them, when you allow, when you not allow. And that's the base of the Minchat Yitzchak we mentioned in the introduction. Diane Weiss, this type of painful question we mentioned earlier, that this fellow that received the envelope, the shaliach, he received it from a donor here from New York, and he transferred it to the wrong person. So the question is, the person called himself Shomer Betaut, I am by mistake a guardian. So you can't impose payment, Diane Weiss said, but he based it on our sugiyah. If you go to his mom and said, you're going to pay because you didn't bury the money. She can say, my son didn't tell me that it's not his money, so I'm responsible to bury that money. They go to the son and said, why didn't you tell your mom? I figured out if I don't tell her, so as I said to her that the money is mine, she is even more careful with it. The question is how far you go with this. So Rabbah rules, so the guardian need to take an oath that that money he gave to his mom. It's a question what exactly involved with that oath. Shvuat Eset, it's a code in Choshen Mishpat 296, but anyway, Umishtabana, he made a mezuzah the Udvain Bekratilta Bignuv. And the mom needs to take an oath that she put it and the money in the chest and it was stolen, and therefore the guardian is exempt from payment. But the Ksot HaChoshen in 291 argued what's the reason to impose this oath on both of them. Anyway, you can read more on this. The next one, the fourth story, it's about a fellow that buying and selling animals, which apparently in those days was common. Hahu hapotropa deyatme. It was a certain steward who acted on behalf of orphans. The Zamalu Torah deyatme. So he purchased an ox for those orphans. So he gave it to the one who's a cow herder, like a shepherd, to watch over them. Lo hava leikacha v'shina v'mechal umit. So that ox did not have a molar and other teeth to eat, so the ox died because it was unable to eat the standard food of oxen. You said that the steward need to pay. I gave it to a shepherd. It's his responsibility. He needs to tell me that the ox is not eating. He told the shepherd to pay. I'm responsible for so many oxen. I don't know. I gave them food. I have no idea that he's not eating it. So afterward, the cow is a paid guardian of the orphans. So therefore, he is required to examine the situation and ascertain if the ox was eating. So he needs to check. And the Gemara said, if that death of the ox caused the orphan to lose money, we impose the payment on the shepherd. Here we talk about a scenario that the orphan is not losing money, because we discovered the original owner of the oxen that sold this one to the store. And the orphan already collected the money from him because it was mekach, it was a mistake. So he said, what is the claim? Compensation from the cow herd. So the previous owner of the ox claimed compensation from the steward. You should have informed us that the ox was not eating. So you need to tell us that it's a mistake into a transaction, as you will be aware that the ox has no teeth. So you're talking about Sapsera, talking a fellow that what he's doing is buying and selling animals. The Zaban Mehachom, that he's just buy from this one and sell to the other. Hirkach, and therefore, consequently, Mishtaba Yumi Delava Yada, Mishalim Bakar Admi Basar Bezol. So you need to take an oath that he did not know about the ox defect, and the cow herd pays the value of the meat of the ox based on the cheapest price available on the market. So Rashi asks, is that a pshara? Is that some type of compromise? The Rishonim that said that that's a real din, but you see more on that in the Ritva and other, like the Harifta and others, Ramban, Rashba. Fifth story, so here you have a simple man who deposits hops used in the production of beer with another. Mar lesarse mehai rami, azal rama meidach. Mar Rabba Amar neichen dayan elai gina, nemale dei zalim shleim. Amar mehai rami. Okay, so because his unpaid guardian is not considering a negligent, because he is not a pay guardian. If he say to the brewer, go and pay, he can say, he didn't tell me take from here or not from there. So the Gemara asked, so since he waits, this delay bringing the hops from the periods of time that it will take to the others, so therefore he revealed that he was amenable to brewing the beer from the deposit hops. So my answer, bidlasha, that will not delay bringing the hops, or alternatively, the two piles were somehow acquisited from him. So eventually, so might say that what exactly the loss you have here? So the Gemara said, "V'hadekam mishtar shelei, u'malafsarat mabre derava dehava shichra chala." So they said that here the beer ferments and become vinegar. So therefore, it's impossible to take the value of the hops from the beer. Another option, Rav Ashi Amar, bechisei. Rav Ashi said that the lost here is what the hops were mixed with the thorns and did not enhance the beer. Page 43, Umeshalem leid mei kisei, and he needs to pay the value of the hop mixed with the thorn according to the profit. So the Mefarshim explain, you see it in Rashba and Ritva, based on the Rashi, that he needs to pay only the profit of whatever that enhance. But I'd like to conclude with a story of the great Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan. It was those days it was a market that the government used to send people to check weight and measurement. So Reuven gave Shimon merchandise, and he said to him, go and pick up from Levi a weight so you can put some produce on one place, and he picked up from Levi the weight, the slide that put together, and all of a sudden Shimon is there with the produce from Reuven. He paid him just a daily commission, and he picked up from Levi. He did everything he asked him to do, and all of a sudden the government official came in and they checked the mishkolot, they checked the weight, and they said that it's not correct and it's not in the proper balance. Guess what? They confiscated everything. They took from him both the produce and the weight. So Reuven sued Shimon to the Beit Din, and he said, you know, I gave you all this produce, carries a great value. What you owe me, you have to pay me. Shimon said, I have no clue. You gave me the produce and asked me to go to the market and asked me to pick up from Levi. I did everything you asked me to do. I have no clue what's going on. So you need to do a cross-examination, as Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan rules, to know if Reuven have a preconditioned knowledge or Levi have a condition of that weight, because otherwise you can impose payment on Shimon if you have no clue. However, if it turns out that Reuven taken oath that he have no clue what's going on with that weight of Levi, and Levi have no clue that there's nothing there, then again, as we said, it's very hard to impose on Shimon any payment if you have no clue and precondition of those weights that he just picked up from Levi.